3, 2, 1. Welcome to the David the Dog Trainer Podcast episode 132. Today we're being joined by Brent and Mariano of the Dog Trainers Podcast. They are co-hosts, and we're going to talk about all things dog training, dog podcasting, and see how this conversation goes. So let's get them on.
Morning. I mean, what is 11? It's 11 o'clock for you guys, right?
It's 10:59.
I woke up 30 minutes ago. Took a shower. Fresh. Looking fresh.
All right. Well, I think we're ready to rock and roll here. How are you guys?
Pretty good. And you?
Good. This
Good,
is
good.
Josh, my co-host
Hey,
here.
what's up, Josh?
What's up, Josh?
He
Meet you,
does
man.
the podcasting thing with us. Wow. So this is, I think this is the largest collection of dog podcasters all at once that I've ever seen. So this is,
That's true. Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
exciting.
We've had like 5 trainers on at one episode, but
Yeah.
this is people who do
Yeah,
podcasts.
podcasting.
yeah.
For sure.
Awesome. Awesome. So I know when we talked over the phone, obviously, you guys like having a little bit of structure to these podcasts. So I actually, before we got on here, compiled probably the most structured list of talking points that I've ever done in my life. So
Oh, man.
you guys
How sweet of you.
You guys inspired me to do it just for you.
We appreciate it.
No
Yeah,
problem.
we do appreciate that.
Awesome. So, listen, why don't you guys kind of introduce yourself, what you guys do? Obviously, I know you're dog trainers as well as podcasters, so I'm interested to hear a little bit about both of you guys and kind of how you got started in the dog world and then leading to podcasting, obviously.
Yeah.
Sure.
You want to go first, Mariano?
Sure.
Cool.
So I've been dog training now for maybe, I'm 30 now. I've been dog training now for maybe 10, 11 years. I got my start in the Air Force, actually. I was stationed at Lackland Air Force Base, and that's where they have the kennels for the majority of the dogs that go through training for them, and I think for the rest of DOD even. And when I got out of the military, I was in for 4 years. I moved back home to LA because that's where my family is from. And I got hired on at a kennel that Brent was the head trainer at, and that's kind of where we met, and that's where our friendship started. And it was just that transition of let's learn how to teach training in kind of a different way. It's not just about working with dogs. It's about explaining these things to owners, because you don't really do that for DOD.
Yeah.
And, from there, I had gone to a different kennel or two, and I had started Untamed maybe, 5-6 years ago, Brent? It was just before I left.
Yep.
Right. My fiance and I moved to Phoenix about that same time, about 5 years ago. And that's kind of where we are now. That's how we're doing this. And we started the podcast maybe 2.5, 3 years ago at this point, right as the lockdowns were happening, like whatever that spring was, that like the COVID.
It was like January of the year of COVID.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when our first episode had been shot. And then it came out like, a week or two after that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think I recall, because I remember when I first kind of connected with you guys and I was looking back at your stuff, it looks like we both kind of started our podcast at a very, very similar time. And it looks like, even episode numbers and stuff like that, like we've kind of got a very similar, experience as far as amount of episodes we've done. So that's awesome.
I've noticed that.
It was funny. I went back into your discography and I was like, hey, we were just talking about making an episode on what he just talked about.
Yeah.
So it's good. Great minds think alike.
Yeah, right. What about yourself, Brent?
Yeah. There's a long version of the story, but I'll tell you kind of like the bullet pointed version. So how I got started actually in a dog training, like everyone always kind of has that story where they're like, I grew up with dogs. And of course I grew up with dogs. So did most of America. Right. But I think the big thing that kind of helped prep me was, growing up, my uncle's ranch, helping with the horses and the goats and the llamas. And, one thing I always tell people that have worked with animals or had worked in like environments where maybe they needed to pay attention, right? Like whether it's like I grew up in the hood, he grew up in the hood. Like we'd have to learn how to pay attention to a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of that primed me to just pay attention to behavior and pay attention. Don't listen to what people say, listen to what people do, and just kind of keep alert on certain things. And I think that primed me to not only be good, with animals, but also with people, right? It allowed me to kind of adjust my code switch a little bit and learn how to be good at stuff or good with interacting with humans. So then when I was 18, I moved out of the house when I was 17. I was one of those kids who I graduated early because I'm an October baby. So I was like 17 and a senior in high school. So I graduated. left to LA. My initial passion was to be in like film school. So I did go to film school. I got accepted to film school, and you know, I ended up working 3 jobs, and then I ended up getting let go of 2 of those 3 jobs. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I was like a broke college kid. And with that extra time, I went to go volunteer at an animal shelter. And at that animal shelter, again, those skills that I learned when I was a kid, like just being a good animal handler, paying attention to body language and things like that, really helped prime me to start working with these dogs. So what's so funny is, like, I'm pretty sure I watched every single episode of Cesar Millan by that age, right? Every single episode, right?
Yeah.
And there weren't too many people on the screen who were like good dog, you know, who gave you some type of path, right? So Cesar Millan was the thing.
Yeah.
And this whole idea of being like calm and assertive and like a leader and all this stuff, you know, that's everything like an 18-year-old kid needs to know in their life because they probably don't have it, right? And so I was able to exercise a lot of those things with those dogs and walking them and playing with them and just spending time and bonding with them. And then what started off as just like a 2-day volunteer thing turned into like a 6-month, like 5 days a week thing, because eventually I got let go of my 3rd job. Luckily at this time I had some scholarships that I was living off of, but it just kind of changed the whole trajectory of my career, or of my path. And there was something that happened. There was a dog I was fostering, or not fostering, that I was working with. It was a pit bull and a Rottweiler mix. No, he was a purebred Rottweiler bonded pair, and I adopted out the pit bull. Really sweet boy. And then I had a guy who was working with this Rottweiler who was like wanted to adopt him. So he goes, it's like a Friday, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to talk to my wife. I'm going to come back on Monday, and I'm gonna adopt this dog. And I was just like, yes, I've got both of these adopted. So excited. And the shitty part was Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon, I was there with him. There was a volunteer, so a 16-year-old, like, know-it-all. Like, I had a Rottweiler when I was a kid. And this Rottie was special, right? He didn't like everyone. He was very particular who he liked. And the guy wanted a guard dog. Long story short, this Rottweiler ended up biting this 16-year-old after we said, like, don't do it. Go away. He doesn't like you. And mind you, this is like a week of prep work. The dog has growled at her for a solid week, right? And now she feels bold enough to come and touch him and pet him. And so long story short, he gets put down that weekend.
Yeah.
Right. So in my passion, in my rage and whatever it was, I fucking throw a fit, and I'm fucking yelling at everybody at the fucking shelter. And like, I'm only like 17, 18 at this time.
Yeah.
And I'm screaming at everybody, and I'm just like, you guys don't fucking know what you're doing. You guys don't know how to do shit here. All you guys do is just sit on your ass and like get paid and blah, 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 blah. You know, just being a stupid, rebellious kid. And I remember making such big of a scene that the officer, who is a friend of mine, he grabs me, he throws me in his office to just shut me the fuck up.
Yeah.
And I sit down, and I'm just so emotional, and I'm just like, oh man, this is bullshit. I just want to help these dogs. Like, this is stuff. I just want to work with dogs, you know? And I was like, I'll walk them, I'll groom them, like, I'll do whatever. Like, these dogs need help, blah, blah, blah. And I just remember just not giving a fuck about anything else, right? And in the middle of these tears, my officer friend, his name's Sergio, he worked out here in LA Animal Shelter. Do you really want to work with dogs? I was like, yeah, man, anything. And so he goes, I have a friend who just opened up a kennel, and he's looking for good people. So he gets on his phone, he calls, and he goes, hey, Bobby, I have this kid here. He's a little crazy, but I think he'll be good for you. Right? And he hangs up the phone. And 2 days later, I get a call from the guy who'll be my mentor for the next 10 years. Right? And this gets me emotional because that whole moment of my life is such a pivotal moment, right? And if you guys listen to the podcast, the DTP podcast, I'm all about mentorship, right? Because there are people who can help. You know, there are people who want to help. There are people who are great educators. So going back to the story, I worked for him for 10 years. I helped build his single facility into 2 facilities. We made it a multi-million-dollar business. Through him, I was able to learn rescue and business and learn how to structure teams and learn how to build trainers and learn how to make systems. And some of that stuff he taught me, and some of that stuff he just let me play with my brain, my own brain capacity. And so I got 10 years experience practicing on someone else's company. 2018, he sold his company for a lot of money. I didn't get any of it because I was just his apprentice. But now it's been 5 years, and I started my own company in 2018. And that was the company me and Mariano worked at together. And then I broke off, started my own company. And so I have Canis Behavior now in Los Angeles. And got really emotional there. But that's anytime I tell my story, it gets really emotional.
That's just a great start to any show.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I try to keep it back because I don't want to be like, and mind you, and that's through years of therapy. I've been able to do just that much crying.
That's funny. Yeah.
People, listeners, dog trainers are not crazy at all. It's a lie.
It's not like we have unresolved redemption issues.
It's hilarious because I get asked all the time by people like, how'd you get into dog training? That. And everybody's always expecting that origin story.
Right.
Batman Dark.
That is the origin story that I've heard of all of them. It's funny. I'm like the opposite. I'm like, I didn't have dogs growing up or anything. I just got my first dog and was like, well, I'm a fucking idiot. I should learn how to train this thing. And then just kind of, one thing after another. So that's awesome. So let me see if my mental math is good or not here. So you said you're 30. Are you about 32 then?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm 34.
34. All right, so I was pretty close then.
So this will so I'll be doing dog training for about 15, coming around 16 years now.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm 29. So we all kind of got started in roughly the same era of dog training then.
Right.
Obviously, you were a little bit earlier than us, so you were probably learning a little bit more through back when, because I think when I started getting on the scene, that's when making Facebook videos and stuff like that first started getting super, super popular, and guys Sean,
give me a year. Give me a rough year. We're talking.
Oh God. I don't know exact year, but I would say era is when Sean O'Shea was the hot shit with his blog.
So 2007, 8.
Yeah, probably in that era, right?
Okay.
So you were probably more in the that was when YouTube was really the place for dog training content, and then you mentioned the Dog Whisperer and stuff like that. What's funny is I recently, my wife and I went back and watched all of the old seasons of the Dog Whisperer, just maybe a year or so ago, right before they took them off of Disney Plus because his new show was coming out. And damn, man, those first couple seasons of that show were wild. There was some shit in it. I was watching episodes back, and I was like, how did they show this on TV? And it was just okay. There was one in particular I remember we were talking about where he was rehabilitating this white pit bull that was fighting another dog in the house or something. And in the middle of the episode, a 15 dog freaking all-out dog fight brawl broke out, and it was a 5-minute long clip of the episode, and it was nasty, blood everywhere. Dogs fucking lashed onto each other and stuff. It's crazy, man. It's really wild how the industry has kind of shifted over time.
Totally.
Okay, cool. So that kind of leads me into my next question, which I think you kind of answered already, which was going to be is how you guys started moving into the podcasting space. And it already, I'll let you guys answer that, but it already sounds like, you're so big on the mentorship side of things, like you were saying, right? And obviously what's the best way to be able to get mentors when you're not close to people is watching content, right? Following them, being able to kind of understand their story of things, being able to kind of understand their perspective on stuff and have that shared. Is that kind of how you guys started transitioning into the podcasting space? Is wanting to kind of achieve something like that and give back to people?
More or less, but Brent and I, when we had been working together, we had done a few separate projects together. Brent has always had, since I've known him, this impressive knowledge of how to shoot things and light things and pace videos and, for speaking. And so I remember helping him shoot this series on YouTube called, it was how people walk their dogs wrong. Yeah. Do you remember that, Brent? And it was a 3 or 4 part, video series on how to walk your dog better and why basically it's important to work on focus walking and so on. And we had done different clips like that, some for the company we worked at, some just because we just wanted to do it because Brent and I were the two weirdos that would be at the kennel like all day, open to close
till like 9 p.m.
Yeah, and then go to the bar after and still talk dogs, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So but the urge was always there to like, how do we just help more people, right? And I had been a professional podcaster for a company in Sacramento called Golden State Media Concepts. It wasn't for dog training. It was for different topics that had nothing to do with dog training. But, Brent and I, even after I moved to Arizona, we always stayed in touch. We've always been good friends, and we would just talk all the time. And it was like, hey, want to start a podcast? And, and it was like, it was the same thing. I was like, well, listen, what's our mission here? We want to do this and we want to do that. Like, what better way to do it? Right.
Yeah.
And, we kind of just put our heads together of, well, Brent's really good at, of like the marketing, the social media. He's very interpersonal. He's really good with conversation, making friends, networking. And I'm really good at like the logistics. I know how to run a show. I know how to write up an interview. I know how to, ask proper questions. I know how to like formulate an extemporaneous outline.
All the stuff I suck at. All the stuff I suck at.
Yeah. And we just kind of play to our strengths, right? Like any other team does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was
And I think he's really consolidating this because he's tried to get me to do a podcast for like 2 years prior to this. Yeah. And I didn't listen to podcasts at the time. I'm like a visual screen kind of guy. So like I don't have a lot of content on the internet because I'm a long form dude, and long form takes a long time. Yep. And then coming from a film school background, I'm just like, it needs to have a nice camera and a nice shot and good lighting. Yeah. And I fucking hate that. And that's why I haven't produced any like series at this time yet, because I can't tell my brain like a cell phone is fine, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think one thing he didn't mention about the ideas of the podcast, it came back around like 3 times. And my biggest pet peeve with podcasts that I did know of is like the 3-hour episodes that kind of went in all different directions. And kind of like, I know that that's the format for some podcasts. And I think if you have interesting people on, or you are interesting, that works for a lot of people. But I felt like the best way that we could serve, and I think this was kind of like our negotiation me and Mariano had to kind of figure out, was like, all right, as long as we can format things so that people can have digestible bits of information. So if you see an episode on, the top 5 things that all dog trainers do wrong, like whatever it is, those people are going to listen to that episode and be like, fuck, I think I just got smarter. Yeah. And that's always the goal, right? Yeah. It's like, I think I just got smarter, and I learned it in bits A, B, C, and D. So that way I can sequence it in my head, so I can memorize it in my head, so that I can then teach it and hold it on to in my career, right?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of our compromise. And I think once we narrowed down that format, the rest of it was just discipline and like getting together and doing episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the balance of, wanting to be educational while trying to be entertaining still is always the struggle. You know what I mean? Because like if you get too rigid with stuff, like you could lose some of the entertainment factor and it feels too like textbooky, Sure. But if you're too loose with it, it's like we've done episodes before where it's like, and because we do, I think I was telling you guys, like predominantly it's just us on the podcast. Like we do guests maybe like 30, 40% of the time, something like that, maybe even if that. But we've done some episodes where it's like, because we film every Thursday, like we that was our big thing, is like set a structure to it and stay to it, as opposed to like wait until you're inspired for it. And there's been times like we hit record, and like as we're hitting record, 60 seconds before we hit record, we finally figured out what it is we're going to talk about on the episode. And then it just gets derailed and goes in like 17 different circles. And we're at the end, and I'm like, what do I title this? Like, what do I put in the description? You know what I mean?
What's the overarching theme?
Yeah, like what is the overarching theme of this episode? And it's funny, we always like at the end of it, we like figure out a way to like, okay, we're gonna wrap this all up full circle with this concept that we somehow stayed within. So that's
and make it make sense. Yeah,
that's
cool.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever done this one? Because this is me and Mariano all the time. We'll spend an hour and a half recording an episode just to get through it. We'll be like, okay, and that's the Dog Trainers Podcast, and blah, blah, blah. And then after we hit stop recording, we're just like, that was shit.
Yeah.
Let's do it again.
That was shit. We're gonna do that again next week.
So there's definitely been a couple episodes. I can't think of specific ones, but there's definitely been some episodes that I've been like, that wasn't our strongest one.
Yeah.
But they've all went up. Anything we've ever filmed has went live. I think. I don't think we've ever cut anything from one before.
No, only when we had technical difficulties. We gave up.
We had a phase in podcast, which you guys obviously are professionals with this, right? As opposed to us, but we've had some definitely technical difficulties before where we like filmed like everything that could possibly go wrong, like goes wrong in the middle of filming. And we're trying to figure out a way to like salvage it. So
Yep, it's hard.
And I think so for us, like I'm not a dog trainer. I'm a food photographer. Like, and I've done.
I'm a food eater. That's great.
There you go. Perfect.
Got a lot in common.
Yeah, but I think the dynamic for us is
It's like food porn from the consumer.
You take some serious food pics.
Food porn pics. Yes, but like our dynamic is he's the expert and I'm the layman terms guy that when he gets because sometimes you know how it is. You get really into the science and you guys start throwing these terms out and I'm like, okay, so this is what he means. Like for all you normal people.
You make an excellent point though, because that's an important connection to have. It's just the layman, right? Is like, this is a dog training podcast. And I would imagine like you or like us rather, most of your guys as listeners are probably dog trainers. But you'd still want it to be digestible to owners too.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing though, right? So we started off as primarily like a lot of our clientele and stuff like that, like find us through the podcast.
The podcast. Yeah, that's cool.
So it's, we have certain episodes that we almost early on started branding them differently. You know what I mean? Where like certain episodes that were more catered towards the client, like we would post those episodes as like the David the Dog Trainer podcast episodes, and other ones we would label as like business specific episodes for your dog trainers and stuff. So I think it's an interesting balance of the two that we hit sometimes, and then certain episodes can kind of cater to both,
Yeah. I think it's smart of you too, because you can see what performs well with who.
Yes.
Right. So that's a cool idea for sure.
Exactly.
Speaking of like podcasting guests, because I know you say you don't have many, but I saw that you had Danny Wells on, and I would be very interested to know, did you get Jamie locked down?
So we're currently figuring out exact days and times. He's obviously, with everything going on over there, they have a couple big hearings coming up that most of his energy is going towards. He is committed to doing it. It's just a matter of figuring out exactly when he could chunk the time out for it. So I'm definitely really interested to do that. It's like anytime we have like these big platforms like this, I think it's really important to, utilize them to the best we can to help educate both the dog trainers as well as owners, right? Like, we have a lot of our clientele that listens to the podcast, and many of them listen to that episode, and that was the first time they ever heard about any of this stuff even happening in the dog world. You know what I mean? Or I think I don't know if you were alluding to or not, the episode we just did last week on like the whole Zach George dog daddy bullshit that's going on right now, right?
I was going to be kind to Zach and not say anything, but yeah, I heard that one, and how Ivan reached out and Zach kind of politely was like, I'm good.
And it's, it's a balance, right? Like, we're not trying to go out there and like bash people by any means. Like, that's not at all our intention with this. And frankly, like, everybody's welcome to train how they want to train. And listen, like, I'm not like team dog daddy either. Like, he's like my favorite person in the world by any means, but it's
sure.
But the problem is like that whole conversation right now is so much bigger than the two of them. You know what I mean? It's just being directed towards the biggest person right now.
Totally. And I think that in your episode, you've explained yourself perfectly. It's you said exactly what you said, in detail of like, listen, I'm not saying that I'm like the dog daddy's number one fan. I have my own issues, but the problem is who's next?
Exactly.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that makes perfect sense to me. And I remember saying the same thing. Like, it was funny when you had reached out, because I had been watching your stuff for months. Right. And I had also been watching this whole thing, like Zach and Robert Cabral and Ivan and, and everybody kind of going at it. And Ivan was the one person who had the appropriate response to Zach every single time without fail, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not playing into the games of it,
Right. But finding a professional way to still be like, when you want to play with the big boys, you come let me know.
Yeah.
Right. Because it is important for him to be like, the thing is, I'm doing an actual study.
Yeah.
I know that you feel a certain way and everything else, but your initial, like, the problem is you put your foot in your mouth, because the initial thought was, I train the way I train because of the scientific consensus and everything else, right?
Yes.
But when we try to conduct a study, because good science is really just good observation. So let's observe some more. Let's see what's up. What if the methods have changed? What if the tools have evolved? How do we know this is still the case, right?
Yeah.
And all he's like, I'm good. And it's like, okay, well, that's fine, but that's also very telling is the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I am very interested to see what Ivan kind of cooks up because like I was just talking to a buddy of mine just earlier today who just finished like Ivan's classes and stuff or his course.
Oh, the Trained Without Conflict course.
Yes. Yeah. And he was saying, he commented on the recent video we posted and just said, he's got some stuff he's about to drop that's going to be really big. So I'm pretty excited to hear that.
There's a few big players in the game that are about to start dropping a lot of content that I'm really excited about. I won't like out people, but there's a lot of very like finally I think there's coming to be this shift where social media heavy dog trainers it's like cool and people have made it popular, but the real academics of the game are a lot of them are starting to have this thought of like, should I say something about this? And we're like, yes you should, right? So it's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, this kind of, I guess, segues into the next point that I have a little bit. So I'm interested. This is a conversation I feel like I have with myself a lot, and I like to talk to other similar-minded people.
I got a lot of those. Right.
Yeah,
talk to myself a lot.
Talk to myself all the time in my pet rock.
So what do you think, like, our job as professional dog trainers to keep learning is, and what I mean by that is, like, when does learning stop past just staying current on new methods coming on the scene?
Never.
Does that question make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. And the answer is never. And I would say because dog training in itself, Brent and I are going to be doing a really cool seminar coming up next month with Michael Ellis. And it's surrounding a very similar topic here, which is, even if you've absolutely like mastered your realm of dog training and you can get your hands on this dog and you can figure it out, you still always have to improve as a teacher. You still always have to improve as an educator. And something that a new mentor for me, but a guy who I admire very much, his name is Dr. Stuart Hilliard, and he's the guy who runs the breeding and training program for the Department of Defense. And he's a fucking genius. He was explaining as part of a 5-day long symposium that they did. He was explaining not only be able to speak and explain these things like analytically, but also in story, because you have to pass the message, and stories have always kind of culturally helped people gain knowledge. But then once you can do all that and you can juggle all that, then you have to throw another ball in there, which is learn how to be very picky and specific with the terminology you use, right? And I commented that to you when we spoke last time, was like, you're very clever with your words, right? And that's because you have to get granular with what are we delineating or what are we identifying. And that's kind of a skill in itself, because when we start to get more analytical, like when we run studies and stuff like that, a mislabeled issue here could flip the whole outcome of what people saw. And so there's never going to be an end to it. It'll take people lifetimes over and over again. And as stuff keeps evolving, it's going to continue to do so.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. Like, if you look at, I think it's the Myers-Briggs test, right, where they look at like personality traits in people and stuff. Like, I don't know how many combinations of personality there are, but I think there's tons.
Depends what model you're using.
Yeah. But there's so many different type of person out there, right? And every single one of them, receives information in a different way. And that's one of the things, like with my trainers at the facility, like I'm coaching them through constantly. And I've said since the very beginning is like, when I look at other trainers at this point, obviously you want to be aware of methods, and that, like I was saying in it, like, staying current on like new methods or new trends and stuff like that in dog training, I think is very important. But more importantly, everybody has such a distinct way of articulating information and for better choice of words, like branding that information in a way that resonates with different people, which is why when you look at characters like, say, the Dog Daddy or, Zach George or Tom Davis or Larry Kroner, like any of these guys, their methods inherently aren't so different. You know what I mean? Like, there's definitely some major differences between them, but the way they brand and package that information and put it out into the world is really where the magic happens and where their followings come from. And each one of them has such different audiences that likes them. And being able to understand all of those things individually, I think, is a never-ending game and a never-ending skill that we have to be mastering,
Exactly.
Well, and that kind of brings this point, like, will we ever master it? That's kind of this idea. And one big thing that Dr. Stuart Hilliard mentioned, and I think this is just important for dog trainers and dog owners to understand as well, just as humans, is a lot of times we're arguing over a technique, right? We're arguing over a tool or am I pivoting? Am I clicking? Am I feeding for engagement? Like, what am I doing? You got to remember, every single technique belongs within a system.
Yeah.
right? And I think the
100%.
mistake with a lot of dog trainers is they learn a technique and they try to put that square technique into their round system that they already know, and they're wondering like, I see that it's helpful. So like I had the advantage over 10 years, like after learning Keeler method, then I learned that whole system, and then I said, okay, I'm not going to do Keeler with certain puppies. All I'm going to do is food work. So I studied the shit out of Ian Dunbar. I did everything that Ian Dunbar did. Only food. I didn't put a correction on a dog under 6 months for a long time.
Yeah.
And I saw the limitation, and I had to measure every system, and I had to measure like what is the advantage, what's the disadvantage, what's the time advantage, what's the time disadvantage, what is the downstream, benefits, what's the downstream disadvantages, right? And like when you measure each system and you study them as a system, then you get it. Then you're able to be like, okay, now I can switch right here, right? But a lot of times we're just learning methods because unfortunately on social media, if that's, if YouTube University is where you learn shit, you only got 5 to 10 minutes to keep someone's attention, and you can only teach a technique, right? You can't actually teach a whole system.
That is a beautiful way of articulating all of that, and that's why, let's look at it from like a client perspective. Like I'm sure you guys have experienced this as dog trainers, is the clients who are very, very active with their dogs, obviously. They're very active in educating themselves on different things, and they do what I'll almost refer to as kind of like trainer hopping a little bit, which is where they'll talk to like 5 different trainers to get advice all at once on their situation, and then they try to apply all of those individual methods all at once, and they wind up confusing the ever-living fuck out of the dog, right? And themselves.
Or themselves, yeah. Client.
Right? Yeah. Which is exactly that, right? Like people ask like, well, how did you get your system? Because everybody has their own kind of like spin on things, right? Sure. And it's an accumulation, I think, of, when I was early on in dog training, it was the same deal, right? Like I would learn and try to replicate what somebody was doing to the best of my abilities, with the best knowledge that I had, and do it completely, and then see where the limitations were with it, just like you did with where you saw like with a Dunbar approach or the Keeler method approach or any of those types of things. And as you do that enough and you understand not just the method, but the why behind the method in conjunction with that particular system, then you could understand how to take those pieces and apply it into your system in a way where it works, right? But if you don't understand deeply the why behind those methods, like why is that working right now, or why is that not working right now, or why did this individual put it in that exact spot where they would do it, right? You're always going to be lost when you run into a hurdle with it, right? And where it doesn't work, you won't know how to kind of bob and weave and ultimately make it work.
Yep. And I would say there's a lot of so this weekend we were with Michael Ellis, and we were going over one of the modules of our seminar, and one of the modules is called Master Your Material, right? And I would say I've worked with a lot of dog trainers and interviewed a lot of dog trainers and helped a lot of dog trainers, and not everyone has this mentality where they want to like dig deeper and dig deeper and dig deeper and ask why, but why, like a really curious child. And I think I always believe like, and this could just resonate with human nature, but when you keep asking why, like why should I do this? Okay, well, why am I doing that? Okay, well, why am I doing it? At some point you will connect to some universal truth, right? Whether it's like a scientific truth or like just something. And a lot of people don't try to anchor what they learn to a universal truth. They just kind of go like, well, I mean, that's what Sean O'Say said. Yeah. So, or that's what so-and-so said, or, and then they just kind of roll with it and it happens to work, but they still don't really understand why it's working or why it's not working. And so that's kind of not everyone is built that way.
I look at that concept as, and this is where I think it's difficult, right? Because if you look at a lot of big name players in the dog industry, or people in general, right? Like we're all guilty of having our own egos, right? And some of them more fragile than others. And, as you develop a bigger fan base and stuff like that, obviously it gets more difficult to kind of, keep yourself in check with it, right? And I think that it's almost discouraged now to I refer to as like almost like challenge your mentors a little bit, right? And I don't say that in this mean way of, challenge them and they're wrong and this and that, but it's like if we could intentionally look for the holes in things, I think sometimes that'll lead us even deeper into the path of understanding the whys behind stuff and help us to be able to anchor into the things that you can't, right? Like when you go to, like, you look at this and you try to challenge it, you're like, no, that's universally true, right? And it could give you a lot of similarities across the dog world to know what's important to focus on,
Sure. Absolutely.
Go 100%.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to say something. Sorry.
No.
Great. So kind of moving on here then. So obviously you've had a lot of guests on, right? Are there any particular guests that you would really like certain types of guests you would really like to explore more that you haven't already?
I'm sure Brent and I have different answers on that.
Yeah, you go first. Go ahead.
I would like to have on more academic guests, and I would like to have on more behavioral, like ethologist guests on. I think that would be a really cool spin, especially with where we are now, with how people are starting to debate. And I feel like a lot of these trainers are starting to throw the word science around kind of haphazardly.
Sure.
Versus, and they often misappropriate or misrepresent what science really focuses on. Like Brent said about, Dr. Hilliard was mentioning, everybody's so focused on technique and everybody's so focused on whatever.
Yeah.
You know what scientists focus on? Outcomes. That's what they look at, right? Did the rat do the thing or did it not anymore? Was this, at the end of the day, rewarding to them, regardless of what you think about it? Did it work for them or did it not work for them, right? You're kind of irrelevant here. You're just the vessel that's offering them an opportunity to learn this. And I think that there's a huge irony when you speak with a lot of these people. Like, I've kind of made it a point to just reach out to a lot of people, and just be like, hi, my name is Mariano. You don't know me. I'd love to be a mentee, and I'd love to make it worth your time. Like, what can I do for you? But I want to learn from you, basically.
Yeah.
And what I'm learning from everybody is how simply they look at things, and how dog trainers online love to pretend it's so complicated, and it's not.
Yeah.
Where do you
think the balance is of obviously the world is, if like we were just talking about, obviously, like digging really deep with stuff, like you can so easily overcomplicate everything by doing that too much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you were saying, it is, but at the same time, sometimes we could oversimplify things a little too much, right? How do you strike that balance between the two?
Well, I look at oversimplifying as an explanative thing, right? So I don't mean that scientists are overly simplistic in how they explain things, because oversimplifying means you left important stuff out, right? Simplifying just means I told it in its proper context. I left everything that needed to be there, but I made it as accessible to the layman as I possibly could.
Yeah.
And that's what they like to do.
That makes sense.
Nice. That's well worded.
Yeah.
What was the question again? the original question. Question.
What type of guests you would like to see on, or any particular people you'd really like to engage with and talk to, and why?
Yeah,
I George.
Well, I think the really big one, like there's very talented R+ trainers that we'd like to have on, like Kiko Pup.
Yeah.
Like I would love to have R+ trainer. We've had a couple. We've had Denise Fenzi on. We've had Sarah Brewski. People who can talk to both sides of the aisle, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's like there's so much that we have to learn from the R+ community, like so much, right? The same way we have so much to learn from the sport community. And it's I would like to have those conversations, but a lot of times they never answer our emails, or they're busy. Like I would love to have Ian Dunbar on the podcast.
Yeah.
And we've reached out to him 4 times. We got his wife, Kelly's going to be on, or his ex-wife, Kelly. She's going to be on. But I would love to have some of these R+ bigwigs, but I think there's just too much politics there behind it. And we never really wanted to try to set out to be like the balanced dog training podcast, but it just turns out that's what it turned out to be. But I personally would love to have a lot of R+ trainers.
Yeah, well, it was a lane that we didn't pick for ourselves. It was picked for us because there was this pivoting point where Brent and I had this conversation. Like, Brent and I have this really funny process of working through ideas where we both get on the phone and we explain 2 versions of the exact same thing, and then we like are convinced that the other one has a different idea, and then 45 minutes later we're like, yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Okay, then let's do it, right? And that's basically us in a nutshell. So we've come to this consensus like a year and a half ago where it was like, dude, all these guests that we've had on, we need some like R plus. We just need to balance it out, right? Just get different types of trainers on, and we're like, sure, no problem with that. It's just harder than you think it is all, right? Yeah. So it's not that we don't want to, it's they don't want to, and and it becomes difficult. And Brent and I have had this like conundrum of how professional, like how responsible are we for staying polite and professional, meaning if we invite someone and they choose not to be on or don't respond or whatever, do we just kind of let it ride? Or at what point do we be like, yeah, guys, just so you're aware, we did in fact reach out to this person on several occasions. They just not get back to us.
Yeah. And you were talking about the Danny Wells episode that we did, and he brought up some like interesting points because he's in the thick of it right now, obviously.
Yeah.
Like it is unbelievable because same, right? Like we've invited dozens and dozens and dozens of force-free trainers on the podcast before, right? We've offered to pay them, like, it's like whatever we could do to start this conversation a little bit, like we want to do it, right? And same deal, just been rejected every single time, right? No interest in it, stuff like that. And Danny was just saying, like, he's kind of just sick of the, like, us trying to be the nice guy through all this kind of stuff when, at a certain point, it's like you look at the reality of like they're trying to destroy like what we do for a living. You know what I mean? Like it's not as friendly of like, oh yeah, let's just have a conversation about it. Like it is a true ideological difference of they really think that maybe not that we're bad people, but the things that we're doing are inherently very, very wrong. You know what I mean?
But who does things that are wrong?
What was that?
Like who does things that are wrong? What do you call somebody that does bad things? Like the A to C isn't that far away.
Oh, like
right?
a bad person? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, right. Like
so they do think we're bad people. I get what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, you're not a bad person. You just abuse dogs and torture them.
You just do bad things. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like the word game. At a certain point, it's like, look, I get that you're trying to be diplomatic or like non-confrontational or whatever, but let's just call a square square. Yeah. Do you think I'm this? No. Do you think I do this? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Would you consider somebody who does this? Yeah. Okay. Then stop fucking with me. Like let's just be real, right?
That's a fantastic point as well. So just on that same topic, right? So obviously as podcasters, right? I'm sure you guys stay up to date with a lot of the dog training podcasts out there, and we brought up Ivan's name a few times, who I'm a huge fan of, right? Big Ivan fan, obviously.
Yeah.
And he is the only person I know of who's been able to successfully get some big name force-free trainers on his podcast to discuss with them, obviously. And then, it further kind of frustrated me a little bit, though, because as I was watching all of those episodes that came out, it felt like it was either one of two things, right? It felt like either on one side, the entire episode, they were trying to play this game of being too nice to each other and avoiding the actual conflicting conversation. You know what I mean? And it's like this, we're joking. It was like the whole time it's like, wow, this is so great that we could have a conversation about this. Nobody wants to have a conversation about this for 3 hours. The conversation never actually happened, right? Or the other side was when they did actually discuss some of the important topics that are kind of plaguing the dog world right now, it was discussed in a frame that your average dog owner is not able to relate to, meaning everything was equated directly to sport dogs. Right. And like IGP or police canines, which are it's a important side of the equation, obviously, but really what your average owner, who is the people that are going to be ultimately voting if some of this stuff starts hitting the polls, right? That they just want to know, like, how am I going to be able to live the best life with my dog possible, not how am I going to be a world-class competitor. You know what I mean?
Sure. Right.
So that's the other thing that's frustrated me about the conversation too, and I'm interested what your guys' opinions are as far as what you've heard, as far as any conversations that may have actually happened amongst differing opinion trainers.
Specifically to Ivan's podcast or
in general?
Just in general.
Just in general, yeah.
Man, that's a lot that we could go 30 different directions. But
there's a thinker.
Sheesh. So let me just make sure I understand what you want. So what are the conflicts that exist in that conversation, or
no, just in general, like, are there things, like, as you've seen people try to bridge that gap, right, between force-free and balance training, we'll just say, right? Are there things that you have noticed that have been frustrating to you?
Oh, for sure. I think as it goes, it's like you're trying to make emotional arguments or you're trying to make rational arguments with emotional people. I think doesn't matter what side you're on, that always will mess things up, right?
Yeah.
Because at some point someone starts yelling or starts crying and then starts saying like they're dying, and then all of a sudden the argument's over, right? So I think the over politeness, the deflection, over politeness will lead to the deflection.
Yeah.
I think it creates a lot of space for deflection, but then pushing too hard will create combativeness, you know? So that dance gets annoying. And honestly, the only real conversations I think you can have with someone of a different opinion is if you truly want to understand each other, right? And a lot of times, like, there's not going to be, you're not changing Susan Garrett's mind, you know, you're not changing Ivan's mind, you know, you're not going to change them. So really now it's just a matter of like comparing, you know, theoretical wieners and just the size of them. And
I haven't heard the term wiener in such a long time.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. I don't know. There's that gets annoying. I think to your point, it's an extreme, but I think it's necessary because they're trying to stay cordial and they're trying to stay polite. And the only real way is like, all right, you're going to sit with me, I'm going to sit with you, and we're actually going to try to understand each other's point. And I think that's I'm going to probably veer off in a different direction, but like, even as a young dog trainer, I remember just having a belief and not being able to explain my other side's point.
Yep.
And so once I cut that shit out and I'm like, I'm going to make your argument for you and tell me if I'm correct. And if I can do that, then that means I'm actually trying to show empathy and trying to understand you. I can still disagree, but I can understand where you're coming from, at least, you know? And a lot of trainers and people aren't doing that. And that's just that's how the current state of humanity is in general, which is a whole different topic. But yeah, you that will only get solved if we really actually want to understand each other.
Yeah,
right?
I think that makes a lot of sense. Were you gonna say something?
No, I was gonna say our girl over at Proper Paws. What's her name?
Taylor.
I like the name Proper Paws.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, Taylor. We had her on a couple times, and it was before. Now she blew up. Like she got IG famous. But
shit, maybe we're gonna blow up.
Yeah, maybe. It was all us for sure. Definitely no. You know, she's a positive only trainer, and those were some of the best conversations because both sides, you know, we came in open-minded. She came in open-minded. We had discussions on the different ways that they both train, and it was just an hour and a half of just great conversation of people understanding, like, you know, we are trying to do the same thing. Yeah, we do it a little different, but that's okay. Like, it works for you, this works for me. And it was so nice to, like, you know, right now, I barely say anything because I just get enthralled by all these dog trainers talking, you know? So I was just sitting there. I was like, man, why couldn't this just be the norm, you know?
Well, the interesting thing about that, so she's very into Susan Garrett, right? So that's like her kind of idol dog trainer. So she uses Halties and stuff like that, which whatever, we could debate how force-free that is or not. But regardless, right? I first found her because some of her videos were starting to go viral, and she was posting really, really phenomenal before and after videos, right? Of like very reactive dogs that were extremely out of control when people were entering the house. And she literally did the balanced dog training thing of like, here's where this dog started, here's where this dog ended, right? And showed her work and did really, really phenomenal work. So we got her on, and the point of that conversation wasn't let's look for things we disagree with, right? Like the point of that conversation is I've got a lot of respect for what you're doing, right? You're showing your work, you're showing that you're a highly competent dog trainer, and I don't give a shit how you're training, right? You getting good results and you got happy customers, right? And I think we were able to really connect that way. And, you know, it helps that, you know, in the internet space, like even when she gets, like, she does a lot of like question and answer stuff on Instagram. And even when she gets questions about e-collars and prong collars and stuff, she's not like demonizing them. She's just like, it's just not for me. That's not how I want to train, you know? So, you know, obviously everybody's got different levels of strong beliefs, you know, and how much they kind of stand by them or disagree with certain things and stuff like that. You know, but in her case, we did have some really, really awesome conversations. So
I would say because you mentioned as long as you have a belief and it's a personal belief, and it's part of your own self-discipline instead of trying to discipline others.
Yep.
Like, discipline yourself. Like, and that's the one thing we loved about like Sarah Brewski, right? She straight up said, I used to train pinch collars and treasure, like, but at the time I was becoming a trainer, I had a temper.
Yeah. And
I didn't want to do that anymore.
Sure.
So she set a boundary and limitation on herself.
Yeah.
And, obviously there's good and bad trainers on both sides, but she set that boundary for herself. And that was like, it's like being vegan or doing jujitsu. It's like, stop talking about it. I'm trying to preach about it all the time. Just be it. Just be it. Yeah. And a lot of respect to you. And if you have knowledge and wisdom that you can bring to the table because you've done that, great. I want to hear it. That's awesome. But yeah, I think it's when people get like very, not religious about it, but very preachy and like trying to convert everybody and then trying to judge everybody. And it's like, you're doing the thing, kind of to your point with Zach George with the negative reinforcement. It's like, you're doing the thing that you fight against, right? Like, you're being you're contradicting yourself, right?
Yeah.
So that's all.
There's a term for that I forget what it is, but I'll look it up and I'll text you later. But there's a term specifically meant to depict when somebody is knowingly doing something, but pretending it's something else.
Sure.
And the example was what you gave during the last episode of like, Zach George is this R+ trainer who's basically using bully tactics to get people to only accept like, R+ trainers, right? Yeah. Kind of calling out event space coordinators and stuff like that. Yeah. Which could be seen as a sort of a negative reinforcer type thing, right?
Sure.
And kind of holding them hostage, like, oh, we'll remove all these 1-star reviews if you give me what I want.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, I'll remember that term and I'll send it to you later.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nice. All right. Well, this kind of segues into I like how this works, right? We come full circle, right?
It's almost as if we're all professionals or something.
That means you made a good outline if it all kind of flows.
Okay. So here's the next somewhat related topic, I suppose, right? So looking through, all of the guests that you've had on your podcast, right? You've got some guests that are like very, 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 very at odds with each other, like particularly, right? To the point where like some like even will like vilify, you for associating with those other individuals and wanting to have them on your podcast and stuff like that. How do you navigate that?
Oh, it's simple. We have to be able to have conversations.
Yeah.
Period. Right. And Brent said it earlier. He was alluding to that quote. I forget who said it, but it was like the mark of an intelligent mind is to be able to articulate someone else's position, even if you don't agree with it. Right. Yeah. And so I guess the way Brent and I look at it was we kind of assess the merits of each guest. Like, hey, should we have this person on? What should we talk about? Because we do our outline, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a matter of being like too political about it. Like, oh, what should we not talk about? It's more just maximizing the benefit to our guests, to our listeners, rather. Like if we talk to this person, where would the real magic come from?
Yeah.
Right? Like, where would the real benefit and the intrigue come from?
Yeah.
And so we'll have that conversation, have the person on. And then later we'll want to have someone else on, and we know they're at odds because they're all fucking public with it, right? On YouTube and whatever. And if they have an issue like, well, why'd you have this person on? It's like, we have to have the conversation. What do you want me to do? These people are popular, whether you like it or not. And it's our obligation to speak with dog trainers of different methods, like whether we like it or not. Yeah. It's my job.
Yeah. Yeah, that's Mariano's stance, and I 100% support it. Because we started this series that's currently being edited. It's called Road Dogs, where we traveled around the United States and we interviewed some of our favorite dog trainers, right? And on those interviews, where we're one-on-one with people in private, they'll come to us and be like, why the fuck did you have so-and-so on? Yeah. Why did you have so-and-so on? and my answer was, listen, Mariano's point, plus we need to have kind of like this menu of really great dog trainers who are on the podcast, because some people are so religious about this individual, they will never see you guys ever in their feed.
Yeah.
So if we can draw their people in, and then they go, who's this guy to the left and the right of this episode? And they listen to you, maybe they'll be able to not only take something positive, but now you can pollinate their minds a little bit and maybe teach them something, right?
Yeah.
And so just kind of being able to have a strategic pool of people, because there have been, but then also I think I think our natures, like I always try to look at the best in people,
yes.
right? I know sometimes that can be a damaging flaw. I'm not an idiot. So like, I know how close to keep people and things like that. But I think that that's the kind of space that we wanted to create in the podcast is like, you're welcome to talk, as long as you have as long as you're good at something, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As long as you're good at something, like we get requests from a lot of people who, they have like 200 followers on Instagram, which doesn't mean that you're bad,
sure.
But, let me see your stuff and let me see if you're a good dog trainer. Let me see if you're a good speaker. Let me see if you're decent at biz. Like, what are you good at that you could help the community? And that's ultimately, you have to be good at something. I think that would be like our base.
Yeah, we just our end goal is our audience. We want to bring value to the audience, and if you can do that, then let's do it. Right?
Which is up and coming dog trainers.
Exactly. Whether we agree with you or not, whether we whatever or not, is if you can help them, it doesn't really matter what I think.
Yeah. I think that's a great stance to have on the whole thing. Yeah, it's interesting. I would say I'm the same way. Like a lot of these guys that like are despised in the dog community, like at this point, like, one of the best ones and one of the ones I was scrolling through and saw is like you had obviously Jeff and Sean on your podcast who, early on in my dog training career were huge mentors of mine, right? Like there was a lot of good that they did for the dog world, I think. And I think it's argued that there's still a lot of things that they do that are very good, right? Now there's quite a bit of stuff that I could look at and be like, not too into that, not too into that. Think you probably should do that different. But if we could leverage the good sides of them, like Sean was one of the first people that I saw that was writing things out in a very, very, very simple, easily digestible way to your average consumer, right?
And he does to this day. He's good. He's so good at that.
To this day, right? I think, some people really can appreciate the no-nonsense approach of Jeff, right? I think some people that are really desperately struggling with their dog need to just kind of be told what it is and be told it's okay to just like get your dog under control and not feel super bad about it,
Sure.
And I think sometimes in this game of like political differences in the dog world, we either don't want to admit that or feel guilty about admitting that. Keeler method, right? There's a shit ton of stuff that we could say. Like I think it was Gary Wilkes was posting recently on his personal Facebook page, like some deleted chapters of the Keeler textbook.
Deleted.
You know what I mean? Like stuff that literally in the new editions of it or new, because I think
that they don't have
the
it from the
30s
old
or something
editions.
like that.
That's so funny.
That are no longer in it, right? And he was posting those out there and stuff like that. It's like there's a shit ton that we could look at in that of like, yo, that's probably that's not too good. You probably shouldn't be doing a whole lot of that anymore. But Keeler was also the first person that I know of, at least, that really put things into a system. You're talking systems, obviously. He created a system that your average owner and average trainer could follow to have a well-behaved dog.
Absolutely.
So I think that stuff is very important. I like that. I like that idea of it, and we really try to do the same. Is have those conversations, talk about the differences, challenge the mentors, like I was saying, but also look for aspects of each one of them that you can kind of learn from and appreciate. Right?
Yeah, I think personally, my big challenge to all listeners of your show, of our show, is you should really practice establishing yourself a very useful filter. And you should be able to listen to anyone about anything and pull what little bit is beneficial to you and not get pissed about it and not get too, don't get your feathers ruffled or whatever they say. Just listen to it. And if it wasn't valuable to you, forget how you feel about it. Was there benefit for you? Then take that. And if the benefit has to be molded a little bit and changed up a little bit, then do that. But the filter thing is my big thing is I'm a big believer in like the audience are smart. Interview everyone and let them pick and choose what they pull from each individual.
Yeah. I like that. I think that's awesome. All right. So I guess last couple points I have here. So I wanted to do this. I thought this was kind of a fun thing here. I want to do kind of a flash round here of some top things you learned from the following trainers. So I picked 3, 4, like 5 or 6 people that you guys have interviewed, and I want to know what the biggest takeaways from those podcasts were, right? So first one, so you've done a ton of work with Michael Ellis. I talk all the time about Michael Ellis was the single biggest inspiration for me when I first started getting into dog training. When I started training dogs, the guy that I was working for handed me the Michael Ellis Power of Training Dogs, the food DVD, and said, watch this and then watch it 17 more times.
Yep.
Right.
And
you still won't fully
and
understand
you still
it.
won't fully understand it. And then don't even get me started on advanced concepts and motivation. That one is even more of a fucking textbook. So what, you guys are obviously have a big, and I want you also to talk on obviously the thing you have coming up with Michael. I
appreciate that.
Yeah. Sure. But what are some of your biggest takeaways or biggest things you've learned from him?
Go for it, Brent.
Shit. Okay. Fuck, so many. Michael is a true artist, and one of the biggest principles that he talks about and he preaches is he says, dog training is a process. It's a process driven profession, right? So if you're results driven and all you want is to get to the end and get that money and get that, you're not going to make it happily in dog training. And he's a guy for 40 years. He's been working his dogs every day, playing with them every day, swimming them every day. And he legitimately lives and breathes dog training, which I know is so rare because some of the other idols we have on the internet may not be that way. Right. And so he's just really inspirational. Be like, if you love the process, if you love dog training, you're going to do well at it. And it's crazy because we meet him in person and we get to know him. And, every now and then, as you get more comfortable with people, you push to see, is there a real boundary there? And he goes, yeah, there's a boundary there. The walls are strong on this one, the morals, the ethics, the principles. He's just a good person. He's a true artist. He truly cares about the dogs and the people he's working with. And it's just I guess to sum it all up, to have a really big love and passion for dog training, that's what Michael Ellis has kind of been an example of, and an inspiration for. Yeah, that's Absolutely. What I would say.
I like that.
Yeah.
What about yourself? You got anything to add to that?
Sure. I think that my big takeaways from Michael, in terms of dog training, the big thing that he's just inspired me so much is his ability to articulate. The man is I think he's the best teacher of dog training alive right now. And I think his ability to hands-on work with dogs is just incredible, and his understanding of the sciences and he's like the most well-rounded person I can think of right now.
Yeah.
And the other thing I take away from him has nothing to do with dog training. Like I told you guys, I'm getting married in 2 weeks, and him and his wife Carol have this awesome relationship, and I see how they are together. And I find myself thinking about that often when we're around them. So that's a big one that I took away. It's just how he is just as a husband, as a family man.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never met him before, but he seems so genuine in everything that I've ever seen of him. I don't think I've ever heard any negativity out of him.
I was about to say, you know how you're judged by the company you keep?
Yeah.
The people who know Michael not only like him,
around him.
Yeah, and are around him. Not only like him. I've never heard anything bad about him either, but it's more than that. It's these people just love the man. And you can see why. Meet him one time. Go to Santa Rosa one good time and you're going to immediately I see it. I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I don't hear him, I've never heard him say anything, and even if in any disagreements, I've heard him talk on things he disagrees on in the most respectful, cordial possible manner ever,
And that's really who he is. Yeah. He's just he's just the sweetest, he's just awesome. You just got to go meet him. It's hard to even put into words, honestly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's that ethos, that vibe of I'm not really into conflict. I'm into work. I'm into like show me, don't tell me kind of stuff, that's Michael in a nutshell. And, I think we parallel that vibe. We don't like talking shit. We have so much shit we could talk, but we don't. Sure. And it's just a waste of energy at some point.
Mama's so dumb. Yeah.
Yo, mama's so dumb. Yeah. So anyways, who's next person?
That's awesome. Yeah. So the next one here. So Denise Fenzi. So obviously a very, I would say a little bit of a controversial crossover trainer, right? A lot of people have pretty strong opinions on her as far as liking her or not liking her. Sure. I'm interested to hear what you guys got out of that conversation.
Two things. Yeah. So we interviewed her twice, one on a behavior euthanasia episode, and then the other one
was with Sarah
Brewski.
Yeah.
And honestly, she's, regardless of how controversial she is, she's I think she's more balanced than people think, or than she claims to be, right? So I think she does have this intention, at least when you interview her, want to understand the other side. And I think being able to just ask questions without judgment, like to be able to truly try to figure someone out. That was really inspiring in that interview. She has this cool saying that I like. She talks about the rights that people have. Mm-hmm. And she goes, your dog has rights, you have rights, and the public has rights. And I thought that was really cool. I've definitely used that before. And so she's like, the public has a right to not get lunged at by your dog.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Your dog has a right to sniff, but be under control, and you have a right to be able to have a dog. Right. And it's like, how do we make all of those three rights mesh together and coexist together without impeding on each other and causing conflict, right?
That's a really interesting, I've never heard that described in that way, but I do really like that. I talk a lot about like when you look at like what methods you need to implement with individual clients and stuff, all the variables, right, that are at play. And that kind of summarizes a lot of the variables. You know what I mean? Like your needs, the dog's needs, and the public's needs based on things. So I really like that. That's cool.
Yeah, that was a good little nugget from her.
Yeah, Denise, to me, two things that really stand out to me for her. Number one, she builds really good R+ trainers. Mm-hmm. Like her students that go through the Dog Sports Academy are solid. And the second thing, and I think that this is more impressive because you should be able to build good trainers if you have an academy, but that doesn't mean that everyone does, right? So she does deserve, I think, a good amount of praise for that. Mm-hmm. But the bigger one is, as an R+ trainer, a very well-known R+ trainer, she's the most open to either helping or conversing with balanced trainers that I've seen of anybody else.
Yeah.
She's done some work with John Gata. She's, she's the kind of person that if a balanced trainer reached out to her right now on Instagram, like, hey, I'm working with this dog, I'm a balanced trainer, but I'd love to know if there's a way with food to do this thing. She'll teach you straight up for free. She'll kind of Zoom with you or whatever and help you out. She's that person, and that's awesome.
Yeah. So getting back to somebody and do you think some of that comes from like her, her past of being a balanced dog trainer and being able to kind of relate to that?
I think some of her ability to not get emotional about balance training comes from her past. She told us straight up on the podcast with Sarah, like, I get the benefit. It was like Brent was saying, like, if you're a vegan because you choose to be for moral reasons, well, nobody can knock that.
Yeah.
You have a value system in that, and that's like real, right? Like you have the right to believe what you believe. And she just straight up is like, yeah, I get the benefit. Like she's in the sport dog world. All of her competition uses tools and she understands that, but she just made an ethical choice one day to be like, you know what, me personally, I'm just not going to mess with that, which is perfectly fine.
Yeah. I like
and
that.
I think that headspace allows her to be like, oh, you do? All right, cool. Well, anyway, here's how I do this. And since you're calling me for my opinion, here's I'm going to show you how I do it.
Yeah.
I did love how she said balance. This is not verbatim, but she was like, all right, so balance training has a leg up on leash walking and recall. Yep. It was like that's what we can do quicker than R+.
Yeah.
But anyways.
Awesome. All right, so I got 3 more here. So these next 2 I'm going to sandwich together.
Cool.
So Sean O'Shea and Jeff Gelman, I feel like they're always kind of a package deal. I think, a lot of people's biggest qualm with them is, when they were doing the train the trainers thing, I think they're probably a little guilty of having some of the least skilled dog trainers that are out in the industry right now. But like I said, on the contrary, I think that, in my opinion, there's a lot of good they've done for the dog world as well. What were some of your takeaways from those conversations?
You first, Mariano.
Well, this is going to apply more to Sean than to Jeff.
Sure.
Because I, like you, watched them a lot in my early e-collar formative years.
Yeah.
But I learned more from Sean O'Shea, and I was more inspired by not only the videos but the writing. And later he made books and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And he would often speak about things that didn't have much to do with dog training, like the importance of self-development. Listen to Jim Rohn, get yourself right, stop fucking around, basically. And the big takeaways that I gather are, number one, the importance of writing out your ideas and of timing it well. Like he's like, I do it early in the day when everybody else in my house is asleep and I can just get my work done. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's very beneficial because I'm someone who's very scatterbrained when the day gets moving. And the other big takeaways, he has this relentless simplicity to him that I think is very useful. It's just, I just focus on what I focus on. I don't pretend to be something I'm not. This is what I do. And if I'm not the trainer for you, it's perfectly fine, right? And I think that where that really benefited me personally, but also I know a lot of people who have done T3, like personally, they've gone through it.
Yeah.
And they all tell me like, yeah, the training was what it was. But where I really benefited was from learning how to not do too much online, because I focus on one simple task, which makes marketing easier.
Yeah.
I learned how to price myself fairly and accordingly and not like undervalue myself and stuff like that. So I think as a business mind,
yeah,
Sean O'Shea is a very smart guy.
Yeah.
And that was my biggest takeaway. That, and he's just really easy to listen to.
Yes. Yeah. I did early on in my training career, I did a phone consult with him. And back when he used to have, what was the girl that used to work with him?
Oh, yeah. They did the Q&As together.
Yes. I forgot what her name was.
Sarah Morgan or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But I did a phone consult with her as well. And yeah, they were very analytical of the business side of things and very, very helpful with some like systematic issues I was having within the company and finding solutions for those types of things.
Yeah, exactly. Sean O'Shea strikes me like he's an excellent boss and businessman.
Yeah.
As a dog trainer, I'd love to see like more.
Sure.
But on the business side of things, I like overall, I have a positive view in my mind of Sean O'Shea.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Got anything to add?
Anything bad?
Me? Yeah.
No.
No.
I think
yeah,
I think the training lacks certain things. Sure.
No, I meant if Brent had anything to add to it.
Oh, me.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Yeah.
I mean, whatever.
Well, since we're on that, anything good that I got from Sean or Jeff?
Just takeaways in general.
I think honestly, I told Jeff this either probably before. I said, you're e-collar Keeler. I said, I respect Keeler.
That's a good way to put it.
The method.
Yeah.
I know that there are things within Keeler that I still use till this day with the right dog.
Yeah.
And the right client, so I understand it. So that I respect, and I do respect the fact that he is keeping certain things alive, but kind of just like you are also responsible for how you package things and give them out. Right. And I think, if people don't like you, people don't like you, that's kind of your fault, right? Yeah. It is partly your fault. And I think sometimes people get stuck. My personal belief is if not everyone's going to like you, but if you're purposely not aware of what you're doing that makes people not like you, or you are aware and don't give a fuck, there's errors in both of those mindsets, right? There's errors there. But yeah, I would say keeping it real, keeping it direct, keeping it strict. There are definitely times for that, and I think having an archetype like him is important. However, it's not a way to what's the name of that book to win over friends and
how to win friends and influence people.
It's
Dale Carnegie.
Yeah, it's definitely not. And I think the only people that will respond to that type of are not emotionally strong people.
Yeah.
And I guess my issues with Jeff, and I'm not going to be one of those people that turn around and shit on him. He's been on the show. He's been nice enough to me after we had him on, not long after I went to one of his seminars.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a huge fan of a lot of it. I'll keep it real with you.
Sure.
In fact, I kind of put my foot in my mouth when we had him on because I went to his seminar after that.
Yes.
And I was talking to him specifically on the podcast about like the bonker thing.
Yeah.
And I understood it as like, well, it's a towel that you can like throw. And in my mind, it was like my dog's digging in the trash. I can like grenade it across the room and it'll kind of land down him or near him or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
But
not exactly.
Then I see how hard, but then I see how hard he like launches that thing at a dog that's like right there. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that's what it was. Right.
Yeah, sure.
But there's a lot of things that I think he's too simplistic.
Yeah.
Like I think Brent's right. With the right time, with the right dog, I think that there is value to that approach. Mm-hmm. But I would love to see from Jeff, and I like him, like just like Sean. I would say, if Jeff were to text me, like I'd be there. I'm a friend. I like you. You've helped me, and so on. But but the way I would quantify a friendship is it's my job to not bullshit you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if Jeff were to ever want constructive criticism from me, it would be, you're too simplistic. Be a bit more adaptive with your training styles. Be easier on a lot of these dogs.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying eliminate the persona, the Jeff Gelman that we've kind of like come to understand, but add to it.
Yes.
Kind of like you guys are doing. There's time for this and there's time for that. And your job as a dog trainer is to be as adaptive as you reasonably can.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that. And it's interesting, I think, Brent, you were talking about the perception of like, not understanding why people don't like you or not being aware of it or not caring, This gets to the conversation we were having with, or the other day when we were talking about like the dog daddy debacle. I think it's a very similar thing, from the standpoint of, I'm not saying if a dog is lunging at your face that you can't be pretty hard on them and get them under control. You know what I mean? But if you're building your brand around that moment, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not that I think you're doing this horrendous, awful, terrible thing, but like you're marketing yourself in a way that gives a lot of ammunition, and with Jeff, when the bonking debacle came about, when his videos of him bonking dogs were like going viral, it's like, listen, like I use I'm the first, we talked about it on the podcast a million times, like the bonker has been very beneficial for some dogs for me before, but I'm it's my absolute last tool that I go for in the toolbox because I know that it definitely looks bad, and it definitely can be taken out of context to be kind of weaponized against a type of trainer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think we should be aware of that. But it's hard because like, you look at the dog daddy who's got fucking millions and millions and millions of followers, and it's like he's branded himself that way, which has given a lot of ammunition towards people. But at the same time, that brand is what's gotten him so freaking popular. It's wild. It's hard to kind of wrap your head around.
But I would argue that like followers and fans aren't necessarily the same thing. I think that he's very popular, but I would argue somebody like Michael, somebody like Ivan has more fans. Somebody like Larry Crone, Robin McFarlane. So yeah. So I would kind of dance that line. That's why social media popularity is like a funky thing.
Yes,
pointless, almost pointless.
I would agree with you with that. Definitely. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, so moving on. The next one on the list here, who you just mentioned his name a second ago. So Larry Crone, you guys had him on. Larry is a very, very outspoken person in the industry, obviously. He is somebody that, I've personally had, some beef with in the past, obviously. But I think that he is an extremely talented trainer. And I think he is one of those people that strikes me as somebody that like all of that outspokenness is really coming from a place of getting back to people that deeply, deeply care about dogs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He strikes me as that kind of person,
Yeah.
So
there's not an ounce of anything bad I can say about Larry Crone. He didn't have to prove himself to me, but again, you meet people that you read their books or you looked up to, and they proved to be good people.
Yeah.
A couple accounts that I can share. I have a friend who's a dog trainer, and Larry Crone was his idol. Like he's like, I love Larry Crone, and he made a video post, and that post went viral. And Larry Crone, like they sent it to Larry, and they're like, "What do you think about this, Larry?" And it was a bad move on my friend's part. Yeah. And I was like, "You idiot! Like now you're famous for this stupid post that you made." And Larry, I guess, wrote him and said like, "Do better," blah 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 blah, and it like shattered him.
Sure.
And he's like, I don't want to be a dog. I mean, it wasn't this dramatic, but he was pretty much was like, my hero just fucking bashed me. Fuck, blah, blah, blah. So when I got to meet Larry Crone for the first time, we were at a seminar with him, and we went as DTP. We were like interviewing and doing things like that.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, hey, I have a friend who really looks up to you. And, this happened, that happened. And he doesn't even remember because he gets videos all the time. Sure. So I showed him the video. He goes, oh, that guy. He's like, yeah. He's like, people send me this stuff, man, and I have to respond to it. And if I don't respond to it, like, also, I said, anyways, long story short, I said he was really hurt by it. And just as a personal favor to me, would you mind reaching out to him? And he goes, of course. So on his own time, he reaches out to this guy and says, hey, man, just want to let you know, like, if I hurt your feelings, whatever, like I didn't mean to. But you obviously, we know that the video is not a good look, yada, yada, yada. And like, let's do better kind of thing. Right. So I was just like so touched by the fact that he, as a favor to me, he only knew me for 2 days.
Sure. He
went out of his way to reach out to this person and just like apologize and just, are we cool? Are we good? So I was like, all right, number one, was cool. Checkbox for me. I was like, you're dope. Number two, when you hear him talk about dogs, when you see him talk to people, the passion just kind of oozes out of of him, right? And one thing, if we want to bring in Dog Daddy real quick,
bring him in.
Yeah, so Dog Daddy, I think every dog trainer who's worked with an aggressive dog has done something similar to Dog Daddy.
Sure.
The problem is Dog Daddy's just a horrible example of what he's doing, right? Like he's just not good at what he's not good at the tactfully restraining a dog, defensively handling a dog in a way that actually calms the dog down. In essence, it just agitates the dog, right? And then especially when you're doing that in seminar format, right? Like one of those shittiest things that I'm sure like Jeff has to deal with, or like Caesar or whatever, like anyone who does seminars, is you want to put on a show for the people in front of you.
I agree.
And there's a handful of trainers that will grab that leash and they'll put on the show at whatever expense to the dog that it is. And Dog Daddy is one of them. During a seminar, there was this really, really aggressive pit bull that Larry was asked, like, what do you think about it? And Larry just goes, and it's a big seminar room, like huge, like a big hotel seminar room. And Larry just goes, I can't really work that dog till I get to know him. And we're just like, what do you mean? He's like, hand me the leash. And he grabs the leash and the dog's like lunging at him. And he goes, come on, let's go. And he goes all the way to the other side of the room and he walks with the dog and he sits down with the dog and he gets to bond with the dog. He gets the dog's tail to wag. And like, he's like testing the dog out, not doing any training, just like vibing and handling with the dog.
Yeah.
And then he comes back 10 minutes later and he goes, all right, we're going to work on this. We're going to work on this. Right. But the fact that he took the time to say, we're not going to put a show on. I'm going to go get to know this dog. I'm going to go work with this dog. And he came back with information and data. And then in that moment in front of the group, we were able to do A and B and the problems got better at that time.
Yeah.
That just goes to show like how much love he has for the animal, right? And how much he doesn't want to make a spectacle. His ego's not really into that as much. And so I thought that was very impressive and something that maybe Dog Daddy could learn from.
Yeah.
You know?
No,
like if I were go ahead.
No, you can finish. Go ahead.
Well, that my point was made. Go ahead.
No, I agree with you, and I've been so outspoken in the past about the seminar vibe is just that's tough, man. You know, because like you have such little time with these dogs. It's in the worst possible environment to train them in, and you know, what kind of long-term results are you really going to get from working with a dog for just 2 days? You know, it's like I'm sure you can give them some pointers and stuff, but yeah, it's like at a lot of point, the seminar touring and stuff, you know, is almost for the sake of, you know, capturing those, putting on those dramatic shows for people, you know?
Well, and if I were to try to do the seminar thing better, right? Like I used to do this actually at my old facility. We got high-speed internet. So what I would do is I would Zoom myself in the other room with the dog. So my client could see what we're doing in the other room. And so, you know, if I were to do a seminar, I would book out 2 rooms. I would book out a isolated quiet room, and then I would book out the presentation room. And I would have a big fucking projector and I would say, all right, me and the owner, we're going to go to this isolation room and we're going to do a demonstration for the whole seminar, but we do it streaming, right? We would do it streaming no matter what happened. It could be recorded, whatever it is. But that way, at least the dog can relax. The owner can relax. There isn't pressure to perform and we just get what we can get. You know, we get the dog as far as we can get. So that would be something, you know, if we were to ever host a working dog seminar, that would be definitely something.
Yeah, and one thing I think getting to looking for positives in people, right? I think one thing the force-free community talks about a lot that I think is accurate to some extent is, I think I heard Zach George mention this recently, obviously through all this stuff, is, you know, if he's working with an aggressive dog, you know, if he's doing his job correct, it shouldn't look like it's an aggressive dog. And I think actually Larry has said similar things to that before. You know what I mean? And though I don't think you'll be able to necessarily get away with like rehabbing it via a force-free process, I do think that, you know, when we have dogs come into our facility that are extremely dangerous or aggressive dogs, right? We don't get quite as dramatic of before footage of those dogs because even spending an extra 10 minutes letting the situation like cool down before you go to start any training could really get that dog out of that initial state of mind. And then how you're doing the leash handoff, you know, like the way Dog Daddy does it with the owner holding it and then here's the leash and then pull the dog away from them and stuff like that. You know, that's generally speaking going to be the biggest point of conflict, you know what I mean, that you could possibly like introduce yourself to this dog in and stuff like that. So, you know, I do think think there is some learning to be done about like de-escalating the situation before you actually start your training. And I do think guys like Larry, they do a good job of kind of articulating and pushing that on the community a little bit, you know? So I would agree with that.
It's important. It's important because like I don't like to talk too much about Dog Daddy. One of my trainers actually used to work for him, and so I know too much.
Sure.
And I think he's just an island boy of dog training. You know what I mean? and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's good publicity, bad publicity. Sure. He's benefiting from it. And, I don't know what my point was, but I just it frustrates me to think about him. But I think better dog handle, just having that better mentors, better examples. Yeah. That's actually why we do the podcast. Yeah. exactly for that reason.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Mariano, you got anything to add about Larry?
I love Larry. Larry was
he drinks a lot of whiskey.
I was legit about to mention. I was actually about to mention that right now, but it wasn't. Well, he's also giant, so he can drink a lot of whiskey.
Yeah, that's true.
But no, what I was going to say was Larry is he's probably the most warm and inviting like dog trainer I've ever met in person. Not only when we went to to the seminar was he perfectly not only willing, but happy to see us and happy to talk with us and spend a lot of time with us, even though they have long seminar days and stuff like that. But after all that, he was even like having drinks with us and hanging out after, and just talking regular stuff, not related to dog training. And Larry Crone is just a very sweet person. And I think it's cool. And he too is a really good family man. I see him do like videos in front of his house with his daughter and stuff like that. And it's, I don't really have anything bad to say about Larry.
Yeah. And listen, like I said, I'm looking for positives here. I'm not looking for anything negative.
Sure.
So awesome. That's great. Last one. Okay. So Tom Davis. So you guys have interviewed him a couple times, I believe.
Yeah.
He, I believe, is one of the biggest. He does a lot for helping people understand and become open to tools. He's like, I feel like the gateway drug to people like moving into the tool world. You know what I mean?
That's funny. No, that's great.
And almost to a fault to some extent. You know, I think some of the ways that he articulates it and stuff misrepresent the tool a little bit, but nonetheless, I think with his large following that he has and his overall, like, he's such a charismatic, like fucking, like people like that guy, you know?
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear what you guys got out of your conversations that you had with him.
Oh man, Tom is 100% authentic. Like he's exactly the same person off camera. That sounds like such a cliche thing as I say it out loud, but it's like exactly who he is on camera is exactly who he is off camera. He's just very like kind of low key, kind of humble, easy, like soft spoken, really interested in dogs and making things better. But Tom is an absolute like social media fucking genius.
Wizard.
I mean, look what he's done, right? And there's lots of people that have big followings and stuff, but Tom has like deals with Crew Coffee. Like who does that, right? As a dog trainer, he has a custom e-collar from Dogtra. That's
wild.
His ability to amass a following and then utilize it in this way is unparalleled. I think the man is brilliant, and he too, I know I keep saying it, but he just had his baby Banks and he's a real sweet husband to his wife. And, I like Tom. Like Tom is somebody who, like, even if I wasn't a dog trainer, I would just want to be friends, but he's just a cool guy.
Yep.
Yeah. The question is what we learned from him, right?
Learned or liked. Just biggest takeaway from the episodes.
He's kinfolk. For sure. One of the first things that we realized when getting that, because obviously when you do an interview with someone, there's a wall up, right? And then we've interviewed him enough and interacted with him enough, we see that wall coming down, and rightfully so. There's been a lot of people try to use him and screw him over, and he's such a super open, warm-hearted guy who's super passionate about dogs, and it's just truly who he is, and his nature is to give, right? On top of being creative and ambitious, right? So once we got to see that side, we started to see what we all had in common, and I think he's a true entrepreneur, He is a true hardworking person. He's gone through very parallel, mental health struggles that a lot of entrepreneurs go through. Sort of like when we go deep into the mental health stuff and the practices that we use to create balance for ourselves and all this stuff, like it gets deep. It gets real deep with him. He's good people. He's really good people and very passionate. He's not an idiot, he's I think everyone has two sides, and he doesn't have a bad side, but he has a sharp, smart, very not naive side. A lot of experience under his belt in the last 10 to 15 years. And I think he's what we call like what I would refer to more as like he's not a rival in that sense, but he's a good peer to have. He's like that you have peers to the left and the right of you that inspire you and like you champion each other. And he's one of those guys that I'm just like, I want to see where this goes in the next 5 years. If you've gotten this already, let's see the next 5 years. And he champions us as well. And it's like, it's just cool to have peers in the industry that you could be like, I see you, and then you guys could just give each other props, and it's nice. It's really nice.
Yeah. Hell yeah. I like that. Awesome. Well, listen, guys, I'm not going to take up too much more of your time here. I'd like for you guys to take these last couple of minutes, just let people know what you guys are working on, where they could find you, what you want people to take away from this episode. Kind of bring us home here.
Sure. Well, I wanted to let you guys know, briefly, because I didn't want to like take up all the podcast time on it, but Ivan's study out in Florida.
Yeah.
I think he's working with the same undergrad student that I'm working with, because I'm also conducting a study here in Phoenix, and I'm working with ASU. I post about it fairly regularly, but I have to be somewhat vague about it. Not for anything shady, but I've posted about it before, like in great detail. This is exactly what I'm doing. This is what's happening, because I also need to recruit dogs. It's a study, right?
Yeah.
And then of course a lot of the Force Free people not only like hound me online, which I don't care about, but they're like emailing contacts at the university, and then they're emailing me like, man, I don't want this drama. Like, just be quiet until it's done. Right. But I just want you guys to, to be aware, and listeners to be aware of the fact that there are studies being conducted right now in good faith, not weird, like ABS studies. And these are all like legit and approved through the IACUC. I'm sure. In fact, I know that that Ivan's is meeting the same criteria, because you have to, right? Whenever you're working with living animals, you have to adhere to certain standards. And the IACUC had to go through all my training modules and expectations and outcomes, and they toured where the dogs are going to be held and where the training is going to be taking place, and so on. So that's one big thing that I've been super excited about, and I'm going to be at for a while. And once I'm done with that, I'm looking forward to the next one. And that's part of what I've been up to. The other pieces of it are just training, just, personal business stuff here in Phoenix, and preparing for our wedding, and just me and Brent doing our podcast thing. And that's really what encompasses my day to day.
Yeah. And then on my end, I think one thing that's really noteworthy is to talk about the up and coming seminar we have with Michael Ellis that we're hosting out here in Los Angeles. 6 months ago, we had this idea, me and Mariano, and what we realized is like a lot of people don't put the same energy into understanding humans and teaching and education strategies as they do in dog training strategies, right? And we get so fixated on the dog training itself that we kind of lack in the other areas. And as you guys know, in the dog training space, most people who are attracted to the animal industry is usually because they have some type of issue with the humans, right? So like there's a lot of people who get into dogs that don't have good human skills or don't trust humans, but they trust animals. What's up?
Which is the worst thing you could do, because you realize it's all humans.
So we have an industry with a lot of passionate dog professionals who may not have the best presentation style or education style. Maybe they don't know how to create lesson plans or whatever it might be. And so we asked Michael, we're like, hey, Mike, has there ever been a seminar that isn't about training dogs, but it's just about training people in the dog training industry? And he goes, not that I know of. And I was like, would you want to host the very first one? And he goes, yeah, I think I'd be interested in that. So we kind of sat down and we had this idea of having a seminar. We have about 50 people coming. 60 if you include like my staff and everybody. But the whole premise is a whole weekend dedicated to like understanding some of the things that we deal with a lot as pet dog trainers, different ways of navigating, certain issues, how to create lesson plans, how to create follow through, how to motivate, how to coach, and how to do those things. And one of the big points that Michael mentioned is he goes, it's been a long time since I've had to deal with like client dogs, right? He goes, probably about 15 years.
Yeah.
He goes, so most of my students are motivated clients with motivated dogs because he does mostly sport work. And he goes, one of the big things that you guys bring to the table is you guys have unmotivated clients with unmotivated dogs. And it's like the art here is bringing our brains together to try to figure out like, how do we take what he knows and what we know in the pet dog industry, and how do we create a system to really help a lot of young entrepreneurs and dog trainers be better with people, and therefore be better at sales and be better at, keeping clients, and be better, like just having good human skills is just having good community skills. Right. And we're really excited for that weekend. That's going to be in October 20th through the 23rd.
Yeah.
We're having it here at my ranch, and we're super stoked for it. Yeah. Super stoked. Yeah. And we've already actually gotten calls in like Canada and Australia. People wanted to like, do it here, do it. Like, we haven't even done the first one yet. Like, just
I know.
Chill back. And this is going to be our first attempt at it. And I'm sure we're going to learn a lot, refining it and stuff like that. But yeah, we're hoping that it becomes something cool, and, maybe something that other dog trainers get inspired to do also.
Yeah.
Because we don't necessarily know everything, but, we're going to give everybody what we know.
Will there be like actual like you were mentioning, like working with clients? Will there be actual clients he's working with at that?
So the working spots themselves are actually dog trainers who are submitting themselves, working with clients, doing a consultation, doing a group class, doing a private session, and recording themselves.
Yeah.
And so the answer is no, there's not going to be real clients there. But we're going to take videos of what they're doing to talk about certain principles and line things up. And the working spots ultimately are like one-on-one coaching with all three of us to see like, this is what we saw. This is what we would do a little different. There's 3 different ways you could have done X, Y, and Z. And then the whole seminar is like an hour of lecture, like an hour or 2 of practice, and then an hour of lecture, and then an hour or 2 of practice. So it's a lot. And then we're working on our lunches. So we actually have like food trucks coming to the ranch so people don't have to leave. So it's like, go get your food. We're working. And then after 5 p.m., 6 p.m., we're having it in the backyard. We're working. So like everyone's working. So it's going to be a lot of simulation, a lot of acting. I actually have some actor friends coming to the seminar as well.
Yeah.
So that way we could just practice riffing and practice getting our reps in and troubleshooting and problem solving and, practicing all that stuff. So that'll be really fun.
That'll be awesome. Because, it's like everybody wants the ideal client, but understanding how to work with the non-ideal one is so important. I had a mentee, if you will, reach out to me just a couple days ago and said, I keep getting, I forgot how she worded it, but she was like, I keep getting really genetically messed up dogs with really green clients. I was like, welcome to the world of pet dog behavior modification training,
100%.
So, I mean, I think that there's a lot of truth to that. There are a lot of dogs that just genetically are messed up, but I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like a lot of times once you learn how to work with that problem client on a regular basis, they become like your fucking ride or dies.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they're, when you look at people that have really troubled dogs and really serious behavioral issues that haven't given up on those dogs and are willing to invest more and more time and money into them, those are people that once it clicks, man, they're
they're in, and there are even trouble clients sometimes with non-genetically troubled dogs. It's just that the client's like very emotional or difficult for some reason. But once you kind of crack that code, it's like I firmly believe like if somebody's difficult, they know they're difficult. Like they deal with it everywhere.
Yeah.
But when you can vibe with them on that level, then they like you.
Yeah.
And then you just have such smooth sailing. So I actually really enjoy trouble clients. Like I almost don't look at them as trouble clients. I'll see on my calendar this person and I'm like, all right, it's practice day, right?
Yep.
I actually,
it's practice day.
I had a moment maybe like 2 weeks ago. I went and did an evaluation, pull up to this person's house, and I'm kind of reading through their things. I already know what's going on, right? And I swear this is true. This sounds so corny, but like, I was tired. I was whatever. Like, I'm ready for the day to be over. This is my last thing. And I kind of look at myself in my rearview mirror and I'm like, here's your challenge. Like these people, like genuinely like them.
I like them.
Like, because I know the eval's going to go well. Like, I know that I can close a deal. I can train a dog. Like, that's all fine. But like them and make them like you back. Like, make friends with these people, you know. And I just kind of went in with that attitude, and it worked, and it was great, and I had so much fun, and it was just nice, you know.
Yeah.
And my whole attitude of getting there pissed because I'm tired and I'm hungry and I'm this and I'm that, and my fiance's gonna be mad. It's been a long day. Yeah. I actually drove home kind of on cloud nine. Like, well, that was fun. Yeah. You know, and it just like I like trouble clients because you can get through to them and build a connection with them. I think that's the same thing that a lot of reactive dog trainers like about reactive dogs is I have to earn that relationship, but when I have it, I'm in. And I feel like a lot of difficult clients are very similar.
Yeah, one of you brought up the How to Win Friends and Influence People, the book, you know,
Brent,
and God, it is so true. First off, I recommend that to like every dog trainer. It is such an unbelievable book. But like once you have the client liking you, you know what I mean? And you have to like them, obviously. It can't be fake, right? But you have like the relationship with the client established. Everything else is easier. If you run into a problem with the dog, if you run into limitations with how far you're going to get with the training with the dog, if something happens medically with the dog, any of those types of things become non-problems then at that point once you have the relationship with your client, you know?
100%.
Yeah, and I think what that boils down to is they just trust you. Yeah. And if you have a problem medically or whatever, they trust that you have done up to that point and will do after that what's best for the dog. And that's not a question. And because that's not a question, then they're like, yeah, whatever you think is right is what we're going to do. Yeah. And that's a big piece of advice that I give to mentees and people that reach out is like, how do I have this tough conversation with this person? Yeah. You know, I feel like they're not listening. I feel like they're not getting it. I feel like they're not whatever. There are ways to have tough conversations. And like I said, I enjoy them. And it's because it's about that balance of like, be tough, but let them know like I'm on your side. Like I realize I'm being a little hard on you, but it's because I'm on your side. And you know, like in a friendly way, like you need to wake the fuck up and figure this thing out, right? And once they get it, like as in get that I'm here to be honest with you, number one, right? I'm not here to lie to you, but it's for your benefit ultimately. And they're willing to listen. And you've injected that little bit of like shake up to the relationship where it's like, look, I need to be able to like check you. That's my job, right? I need to be able to hold you accountable, the owner. Then you start making magic. And that's a really cool thing to see.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
There's a really famous Theodore Roosevelt. He goes, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah. That's
right?
a good one.
And it's completely the truth, right?
Yes.
And that's actually one of the quotes that are one of the premises of the story, because I think dog trainers are so easy to judge and hold others in contempt and to be like, why are you doing this to this dog? And like overprotective, especially coming from the rescue world. Everyone's super overprotective of everything. And I think when we can learn to love the people and learn to care for them and they feel that you care for them, then to your point, David, everything's downhill from there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool.
What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say one of my favorite quotes, I think it was you. I could be wrong, but I'll give you the credit.
Oh,
okay?
man. All right.
Is people that become dog trainers, they think they're getting in the dog business, but they're actually getting in the people business.
The people business.
Totally.
People skills, man.
Yep.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's
totally.
You can train a dog all day, but if you can't communicate that to your client, then you did absolutely nothing, you know?
Totally. I don't want to make this like a quote fest, but Michael Ellis says, you know, that dog trainers
keep throwing them in.
Yeah.
Just the next 10 minutes is quotes.
Yeah.
You're right. It's like, I'm sorry to do this to you guys, but it just so happened.
Yeah.
No, Michael Ellis says, he's like, the thing about being a dog trainer is your real job is a teacher and the subject is dogs.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. And let me, Caesar Milan also.
He's like, you have to exercise, discipline, affection.
I believe it was Ralph Waldo Emerson who once said. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, listen,
Too Short said.
Anything else you guys want to throw in before we wrap this up?
No, I mean, we appreciate you having us on the podcast. I mean, if you guys are listening to this and want to listen to a couple episodes, hop over to Dog Trainers Podcast. You can check us out at dogtrainerspodcast.com and at Dog Trainers Podcast on all of our platforms. We did a cool interview for some of the young dog trainers who might be listening to this. We did a cool interview with a lawyer friend to talk about contracts and how to build contracts and form contracts. And those resources are actually on our website at dogtrainerspodcast.com. And there's more stuff to come. We have a new series coming out called Road Dogs, so check that out when it comes out. This seminar, we have a program in Hawaii that got pushed back to next year due to the fires. But we have a lot of stuff coming up that we can't wait to share with you guys. So we appreciate you having us on, man. Seriously, this was great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, no problem.
It's still so uncanny to me. Like the exact time that you guys started podcasting was the same time.
Pretty close.
And it's pretty funny because you guys do Thursdays and we do Thursdays. That is funny.
Well, cool. That makes it easy for us to have you guys on, and and vice versa, right?
Yeah, exactly. Awesome, guys. Well, listen, appreciate you guys being on, and we'll talk soon.
You got it. Thanks,
guys.
Take care.
Later.